You're listening to WeDeepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of WeDeepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional relationship coach and matchmaker. If you enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, rate it, give it 5 stars. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to host it. This podcast does follow my entrepreneur journey with WeDeepen, and I do share about my personal life journey, vulnerably, whatever I'm navigating in love or in relationship or work-wise. It's a very authentic experience, and I have many vulnerability hangovers. Today, we're going to get into one of the deepest vulnerability hangers that I've had, because you guys don't know this, or maybe some of you do. I did this reality TV show in 2021. It was called X-Rated. I went and sat in studio live with Andy Cohen and 3 of my ex-boyfriends, where they had rated me ahead of time and I had rated myself, and then they reveal these results. I am episode 7. It's on the Peacock network, and I am Lauren, who is on episode 5, is joining me in this conversation today. We've just watched our episodes, and you're going to listen to us recap them. I have also joined by one of my friends, Angel, former flatmate, housemate, who he is a big dating reality TV show junkie.
Bit of a connoisseur. Yeah. I look forward to getting the insight from you all, having actually been in it.
And we're going to recap. So the TV show itself was based around, there was a woman that she would go on dates and have relationships, and then she would send surveys to her exes or the people that she went on dates with, and they would give her feedback for her own improvement. And so the network heard word about it. They created this whole reality TV show about it. I got the call for the show in the start of 2021. And I was interested in it because I've had this idea for a series in the back of my mind for years around, it's kind of like an updated version of Sex and the City, where you journey with someone through for the multiple intimate relationships that they have. And the show begs to answer the question, are we really transforming or just repeating the same shit over and over and over again? And the only way you can answer that question again is looking at your exes. Who have we dated before? So when the show called, and I got it from one of my podcast producers, is in the reality TV show casting world, and they reached out, and I said yes. I tried to pull out last minute, but I did it anyway. And I am satisfied with the show of watching the show. It's not one of those things that I rewatch and I'm like, oh my God, that was awful. I'm okay with it. And so Lauren, welcome to Deepen with Christina. It's so great to be having this conversation with you, because ever since our show has released, we talked about this, and now we're finally doing it.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining. And another reason why too this is coming up is because I am working on a book, and my book does detail previous relational experiences. I think, being now in my early 40s and currently single in the moment, it's funny. I think the show was trying to help us. What are they doing wrong? Why are they still single? Are you Are you in a relationship?
Relationship. It just ended like 2 weeks ago. So it's a good time for kind of taking stock for me too.
How long was that relationship?
6 months.
I'm curious, Christina, you talked about why you did the show. I'm curious why you did it, Lauren.
Me too.
I did the show for a couple of reasons. You know, I'm a stand-up comedian, so I was doing it for the exposure, potentially. I was hoping it was going to get a little more traction than it did. But I was also doing it genuinely to get some insight into like if there was something I was doing wrong. And you know, because I have struggled with relationships, and I do think we're a little bit more blind to our own shortcomings than we might realize. So I was doing it with an open mind.
How did the show come to you?
I got a text message about it randomly from like I don't know who. It was some casting company, and they said I should apply, and so I did.
And was it an easy casting process for you? Like the whole, well, first off, let's say, so when you get the call, they brief you on the show, and then to move along in like forward in the show, you have to call your exes and ask if they would be willing to take a survey and go with you on TV for this experience. So that was a whole journey in itself of identifying like who would be game to do something like that. Which exes do I call? I think I wrote them all down. I had like wrote a list of at least over 40 people that I've dated intimately that I could have asked.
Yeah, I was really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for anyone that I could possibly think of. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like a little easier, I think, because I know a lot of people in comedy, they're obviously eager to get in front of a camera. So I did have that going for me, but there were a lot of people who were like, absolutely not, never. I will never do this. This is crazy. You shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Were there any that you were like, no, I cannot ask this person? Because you seem like, especially with your episode, Lauren, I mean, you had like some real deep, at least one that was really a deep connection and relationship. And I'm surprised that, you know, you let that one go in there.
I didn't. So they found him. Yeah. I would not have wanted him to be on there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So this show appears on the Peacock network, which I think one of the reasons why I didn't get so much traction is because not many people watch the Peacock network. I'm lucky for us. And also that would have been fun to, you know, they gave us a psychological interview ahead of time, making sure that we were sane, that we could handle all of the exposure and the popularity that was going to come our way, which ultimately never happened. I've never gotten stopped on the street and no one has ever said, "Oh my God, you're the girl from X-Rated."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why do you think the show never took off?
I think, like you said, it's on a network that doesn't have a ton of subscribers, isn't very popular. But beyond that, I just think that the show is a little disjointed. I don't think they had a very clear mission. And that really came across in the way that the show was structured. Like some of the episodes really focus on like the sex lives of the people that are starring in the show. And I think ultimately like viewers don't care about that as much as the show seemed to think that they would. I think people liked art. I heard, I don't know if, you know, you heard this, but I heard my friends say like, oh, your episode and Christina's episode were the best ones. And I think it's because like they focused a lot more on like the relationship aspect and like our emotions and our willingness to be vulnerable than some of the other ones, which were just like, oh, he's horrible at oral sex. It's like, you know, okay, whatever. Like no one cares really that much. So I think because I think the show producers weren't sure like what people were going to be into. And so they tried it all. They just threw everything and saw what stuck. And it all just kind of came out unfocused.
And it was entertaining. I think it's very entertaining. We just sat there and we watched your episode. We watched my episode and I was entertained. Especially at the end, and maybe the people who your exes said yes to it because they're comedians or the exposure or whatnot. But you were so authentic in that experience. And friends did reflect back to me saying, wow, you were Christina. Like you're the same person behind the camera that you are in real life. And I could sense that from you. And also the nervousness that came. I mean, you had 4 exes. The final ex, I could feel the most tension for when he appeared, because you didn't know that it was somebody that you had broken up with 2 years prior, who you're in California, he's in Australia, and things had ended, seemed like abruptly, by a text message with somebody who you were preparing to spend the rest of your life with. I mean, you guys were talking marriage and engagement and moving overseas. Yes. And they pulled him out of the woodwork, and he sent videos, which I think a little bit of him sending videos and not showing up on set and being live in camera was a little, what's the word, that like lacking courage?
Cowardly? Yes.
Cowardly. Yes. It was a little cowardly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. He didn't want to face me for real. Like, he didn't want to hear what I had to say. He wanted to say his piece and not have to face any repercussions of what I might say in return.
And this was also the man that you pegged, which they talked about that, which I know Angel is craving to have his first pegging experience.
I am not. And however, when I think about like how everyone came out in the shows, like all the different exes that you guys came on, and then you two, everyone came off really well, actually, except for that guy and one of your exes, Christina. I thought everyone else was, you all were very kind to them. They were also, and then, everything that you said and they said, they seemed to be pretty open. And no one came off badly except for him and one of your exes, I thought.
Exactly. Yeah.
So who is that? That's Brent and for Lauren, and Michael, my last ex.
Yeah. For me, I thought Michael came off like his ego took a little hit, in that he knew he had a good thing going with you when he had the trip, and yet he rated you really low on all these things that came out like us. Wait, no, she did everything exactly how you wanted it. And then he was trying to walk it back, but he just didn't really have a response to it. At the very end, when you shared the letter with him and you were able to get him to be a little bit more vulnerable, I think that helped his case a little bit, but you could tell the guy was just like out of his element, and he came off a little badly, I thought.
Lauren, what's your relationship like with your exes that you did the show with now?
I don't speak to any of them except for Randall. Randall, he's not really my ex. We went on a couple of dates, but like he said, we never kissed. It never took off. And I was genuinely intimidated by the fact that he was like really successful. He still is. And we're still very good friends to this day. He has a committed partner. They live together, and I'm friends with both of them. And he's just a great guy. But the other two who were on the show with me, I don't talk to them. I actually had a pretty big falling out with Ian because he wrote. Oh
no! I feel so bad for Ian.
He wrote some terrible jokes about me. They were so mean.
After the show?
Yeah, he called me disgusting. He said I was like a gross person. Yes. I was like, okay, that's projection. Sure.
I was about to say that's totally projection, because you got on the show, your feedback was like your pickers off. And I could look at your man and I was like, I do think I see she's better than these guys.
And yet, do you feel like the feedback that they gave you about you choosing people that maybe you think that you're, on a lower or on a higher level than them, or that you're not competing with them? Do you feel that part resonated?
No, not really. I mean, I think that they really overestimated my confidence in dating. But that is an issue for me. So Brett did call me out for being extremely insecure with him. And I will say, we didn't go into what made me insecure with him, because he was so brutally mean. And he had this weird crush on this much younger woman that and he every time we would take a pause in the relationship, he would immediately go to this girl and be like, I really want to date you, you know? And so I was really concerned about that. I was like, why do you keep trying to like have this close connection with this person? But he just played it off like I was crazy. I was insecure. It's like, no, you were actively trying to cheat on me. It's just by virtue of this girl not liking you. She literally told him, this is never going to happen. Stop asking me. And he was just that creepy guy who kept coming back for more, you know, like we all have that like friend who's really creepy and is always like trying to get us to date him. And he was that guy to her. And I was like, I was humiliated by that. But anyway, sorry, what was the question? I kind of went off on
Well, I'll say I have dated a guy like that before. And I had asked this person to be on the show. He refused being on the show. He's actually the one who I, you know, when I speak about my relational history, I'm like, this was the narcissist. And I remember him once telling me that he's like, you're acting so insecure. And I remember yelling back and like, I am not insecure. And later that evening, I went and Googled insecurity to read the definition, and it's not feeling secure. And I realized, you're right. I actually am insecure. I'm not feeling secure in this connection. And it was a similar reason. He said he wanted to be in a monogamous relationship, but he would do things that were kind of that were confusing to my own, like, I was confused at what is happening. I wanted to understand my reality. And then he would, you know, point to this other woman and be like, well, I need to see what the connection is between us. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, he's like, it's like a 0.02% that it's romantic between us, but I just have to go figure it out. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like,
oh my God.
So
exactly. Yeah. It's like, yeah, if you're going to emotionally abuse and manipulate people, yeah, they're going to be insecure in their connection with you. Like, that's just how that works. So I can definitely relate to that. I feel like your guys who brought you on the show, like they were very flighty. Like they would always like go off and be with some other woman if you like asked for any type of space, which is exactly how my guys were too, except they were just so dorky they couldn't be successful at it, you know? Like your guys were at least like tall and attractive. Like these guys, no. So, you know, Brett and some of these other guys, like they would try things like that. They just couldn't. They didn't have the tools to actually like go off and have sex with someone else. But if they could have, they would have. And so that was why I felt insecure with him. But I do think that insecurity in relationships is toxic, and it really is kind of up to me to recognize like, okay, I am feeling insecure with this person. So that is a sign that I need to exit from this connection and not try to prove my worth, because that's been my pattern. And so I unfortunately have continued this pattern even after the show ended, even when they've very clearly shown like, this is your issue. You keep going out with these like basically loser guys. Like they were trying to be nice about it. But I've had very similar feedback from my friends and family. And for me, it's not like, oh, I feel like I'm better than them. And I like the fact that I can like that's not what it is. Like, I really do have this like deep insecure part of me that thinks like, oh, if I'm with someone successful, like they're going to lose interest in me. And I said that on the show, because that is really, there is like some weird little part of me that feels like I'm not good enough, you know?
I think that's felt across both men and women when they're dating and in relationship. You said that continued though after the show. Where else has that shown up?
Yeah. So I was in a relationship at the time that the show came out, and he and I watched the show together, and you know, it was really weird. Like I was in a relationship with this guy who like didn't even seem like attracted to me, you know? And we had problems in our sex life. He was, like many of my other exes, very inexperienced with women and relationships, which I have now determined to be kind of a red flag. Like if someone gets to their 30s and beyond and they're like, I've never really like had relationships. I haven't even had much sexual experience. It's like, okay, either you lack the interest or the tools or both. And like, that's not a great sign for like having a long-term relationship. But I was with this dude. We watched the show and I remember him being like, he said something about Shan being like way more his type than me.
What the fuck?
Yeah, he was like, yeah, Shan is a 10. Like, I don't know about, yeah. And like, I remember being so upset and I was like, why would you say that to me? Like, where did this come from? And believe it or not, like, I still continued to date him for a couple of more weeks after that until we finally broke up. And he like, basically, it was the same thing. Like, I wasn't strong enough to just like end it, but we kept like fighting and having these conflicts. And I felt very offended and insecure after those comments. And so, like, it was pretty obvious it wasn't going to work, but then he broke up with me and we never spoke again after that. And then I recently was in a relationship with a coworker, for about 6 months. I mean, we met at our job, but the company folded. So we weren't coworkers when we started dating, but very similar kind of story. Like, he was very depressed. He honestly reminded me of Ian a little bit. Like, he was very depressed. Like, he was very mentally ill. He wouldn't go get therapy. He also was very inexperienced with relationships. He was giving me a lot of mixed signals. Like, he would tell me he loved me, but he wouldn't really act like it. Like, for example, like, I flew into Chicago to go on a trip with him, and like, he left me at the airport. He was supposed to come pick me up. Like, there were things like that were very obvious. Like, okay, he's not showing up for me. He doesn't have the tools. I mean, he kind of gave me a similar spiel that Ian did. Like, oh, I can't give you what you deserve. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, basically this almost like word for word, kind of the same speech. And I still did not hear that, I think, the way that he intended. Like, I was very mad. I was like, you know, I've been showing up for you. Like, I've been a great partner to you. And he's like, I know. And like, I'm not a great partner to you. So it doesn't matter. Like, we need to break up. And, you know, for what it's worth, like, I'm still not a great communicator in that sense. Like, I do take things way too personally. And so, you know, it's something I still clearly need to work on. So watching the show, I think, was a good refresher. Like, wow, I'm still caught in these same exact patterns where, you know, I'm dating the same types of guys who just don't have the capacity for intimacy and for a long-term relationship. But for some reason, I'm trying to like turn them into those partners. And so I'm really glad that I'm doing this podcast with you.
So check me on this premise, because I've heard that, and either one of you actually, because you both have different experiences, but especially you, Lauren, because you're getting your PhD in feminist studies, right? So yes. I've heard it said that women would prefer to date a guy that's less good looking than them, and the opposite is not true. Men would rather date someone better looking than them, but also men would rather date someone that's not as financially well off as they are, and the same thing, vice versa. Does that premise resonate with you guys in terms of like, yeah, I'd prefer someone less attractive than me, or more financially successful?
No, these concepts don't even cross my mind, really. They're not even. It's not even that. If that feels very surfacey.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm with Christina there. Like, I'm 100% not sitting there evaluating people the way that I think a lot of men do. Like, oh, she's a 7, or like, oh, like, I don't do that. Like, I'm not sitting there being like, oh, this guy's not hot enough for me. Like, that's the feedback that I got from that show and from other people, like, looking outward. But I'm not sitting there being like, oh, this guy's not good enough for me. Like, that to me is very weird. Like, I try to treat people in a holistic way. Like, am I attracted to them? Am I interested in them? Do I like the way they treat me? Like, those are the things that I'm thinking about, not like how much money does he make? And I don't know, that just doesn't.
They open up your show. And by the way, if you're listening, I do suggest, I think you can get a 7-day free trial on the Peacock network. Otherwise it's $5.99 a month. and you can, go in, search for X-Rated, watch episode 5, watch episode 7. You'll get a better understanding of what we're talking about. And I think it's fascinating to hear these unique relational stories that we're now unpacking. But early in your episode, Lauren, you share about being a demisexual.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So the way that I explain it to people is that demisexuality is when you don't have what's called primary sexual attraction, which is when you're responding to someone based on physical cues, such as the way that they look, their smell, the way that their voice sounds, like things like that. Like you're not. So I've never really been in a situation where I was like really flustered because I found someone so hot, like that's really never been an issue for me. So in some ways it's kind of like a superpower. Like you can sort of talk to anyone and not feel weird that there's like a tension there, because that just doesn't happen to me. So the way demisexuality works for me is that once I develop an emotional connection to someone, then I can develop a sexual attraction to them. That said, having an emotional connection with someone is not a guarantee that I will ever have an emotion or a sexual connection with someone. So it's very complex. Like I don't fully understand my own sexuality in that sense, like what kind of alchemy is required in order to have a sexual attraction. But it does make modern dating hard because it seems very, like you said, kind of surface. And at least in the beginning, like it seems like it's very much all about like, okay, do I like the looks? And then we go from there.
And that's a question, or personal question.
Yeah.
Are you on birth control, oral birth control by chance?
I am not. No, I don't use any hormonal birth control.
I just want to clear out if that could have been any insights into what was happening. But I'll say I'm kind of similar to you, although I have gone into phases where when I don't have sex for long periods of time, then I more go into like the hunt. Like I'll go out to find it, to fulfill it. But it does feel very animalistic in that moment. And that will generally happen, in my early 40s. So that would happen. I think there's something said that we're healthier when we have sexual encounters. And when you go for a year without having sex, my body is like, remind me what that experience is. Like, I need to feel it. So, but those relationships have never turned into anything from there, because they'll be like, okay, wham, bam, I got it. Thanks so much. See you later. My greatest relationships have come from developing that emotional connection first. And then they've been the most exciting ones as well. And then moving into, I began to open, like, a woman, like it begins to blossom, and I become more turned on from your touch or from your words or from our interactions. And I become more excited over time. I have a guy that I have recently been seeing, and we did this thing. I came out of a relationship and I met him, and after the first date, he called some of his friends and told me he found the one. And I rode that wave of emotional excitement with him. So I'm like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, I met the one. This is great. And then 4 or 5 days later, because now we've talked about that we're going to spend the rest of our life together, and I hadn't had penetration sex in a year and a half, that I went in and I had sex with him really soon. And after sex, I was no longer attracted to him. And I think that was because it happened so quickly that my system was kind of shocked, and it was still processing the previous relationship, and my brain wasn't prepared to allow for someone else. That he hadn't earned the space, the real estate in my brain to camp out there just yet. So
Right.
I was like, eject, go away. And yeah.
I've had similar experiences with dating where like if I feel like the sex is rushed, it's like we're rushing through the parts of a relationship where you build that intimacy and connection. I've been very turned off after the sex as well. I think that's fairly common. Like now there's the whole concept of the ick. I think that's, I get the ick if we have sex too soon for me to feel comfortable. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
So wouldn't being demisexual make kind of modern online dating easier? Like your example with Brett, right? The guy from Australia, like this long distance kind of where you just have to, rely on the kind of the conversations that you're having. That's what you want, right? It's less reliant on the physical. It's just like mentally, are we there? And then, there's a big discrepancy between kind of guys dating online and women dating online. You all get like flooded with, responses on your swiping, but guys generally don't. So it does seem like it's actually a pretty good field for a demisexual to go into.
I have not found that to be the case. For me, I think that for me, I do think it's easier in some respects. Like if the other person is willing to get to know me slowly, but I think unfortunately most people kind of want to know right away, like, do you want to sleep with me? Like, are you attracted to me like that? And so they're not willing to focus extra energy and extra time on one person, which I understand. I mean, the modern dating scene moves very quickly. So I think there aren't that many people even willing to slow it down. Unfortunately, for me, but I also don't blame them, like I do think different people have different needs. And if like you need to know that that person wants to have sex with you pretty much right away, that's fair. That's just not going to work for me.
There's only some kind of matchmaking program that you could sign up for that could help with this, right?
I know I am launching the Love Club. It's coming. I'm going to get to talk more about that in the future. And yeah, everything that we're discussing this is the antidote to that. The slow build connections, even this guy that I just mentioned, we met on a dating app. And so things are moving rather quickly. And it felt too fast for my nervous system. And I just wanted to slow it down and be like, can we just be beings together? And he's like, what does that mean? Be beings together. And I'm like, just like relate, just, be friends, get to know each other. But he, number one, didn't want to reverse the sex. We'd already had sex. So he doesn't want to reverse the sex. And second, he told me we met on a dating app. So we're either going to date or we're not. But the thing is, most people in their, I don't care what any age you are, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, after you're out of, college, there's a lot, our lives are packed with a lot of this adulting. Like there's a lot of things to do, especially if, some of the people that have kids or startups or, you're in school. And when you meet somebody in a dating app, they're not necessarily somebody that is going to cross your everyday existence otherwise. And so I'm very much of a fan of this last relationship that you are meeting someone at work or meeting someone at a festival or a conference, or, it's hard nowadays with most people working remotely, but going and working from a co-working space or just being around other people when you're at the grocery store, noticing those around you at the gym, saying hi to each other. So these are people that you're going to be able to build rapport with without having to know if they're the one, because that just makes it so much the pressure. It's like with this particular guy, it's like after that was really fun to play with that you're the one, but now it's 7 days in, like I just want to hang out and not have this expectation or this fantasy that only if we end up walking down the aisle, like that's the only possibility for us. Hey, maybe our relationship takes some other new form as opposed to that.
Yeah.
So the premise of the show I thought was really interesting, because it's the idea is that you're going to ask your exes, who you get to know really intimately, a bunch of really important questions. Do you think that you've learned anything from having had that experience of had your exes rate you publicly? I don't know if that piece adds into it or not. But then two, do you think that it could be a helpful thing to just start doing on your regular life? Start asking my exes to, like, rate me, but not publicly, just send me a survey or send them a survey, and then get to hear what they say in a more kind of confidential way where you're not face to face and some of that pressure is kind of off.
I mean, I wouldn't send my exes a survey, but I have asked for, feedback about kind of like, when you have a job interview and then you don't get the job, it's common to be like, oh, is there any feedback you have for me? I've done that in dating contexts. Like, I'll say, oh, so this is a good example. I went out on a date. Actually, this guy was using a matchmaking service. And I was contacted through that service. I guess I was in their database somehow. And we met, and I really liked him. Like, I thought he was great. And he was very successful, very kind, very nice. Like, I really, really liked him. And, she kind of asked for us to give feedback on, like, kind of debrief on how the date went. And I really wanted to see him again. Like, I was really, like, interested in him, but he told me, like, oh, he didn't feel like I was into him at all. And, like, he didn't feel like, oh, you just didn't seem attracted to me. And I was kind of like, this was a first meeting. Like, what were you really expecting? Like, for me to want to rip your clothes off? Like, we were in public in this, like, very nice hotel, like, bar. Like, it was just like I was nervous. Like, I was just getting off of work. Like, I had never met you before. And I explained all that, and I'm like, I'm really sad that you feel that way, but I understand. And then he, a couple of weeks later, was like, oh, I made a mistake. I should have said I wanted to see you again. And I was like, well, you already rejected me. Like, it's a little bit, I'm not going to go back now. Like, I really didn't even want to at that point, right. But I did feel comfortable, like, asking him why he had written me off so quickly. I'm like, what was that all about? And I think sometimes it's tricky because often people write you off, especially in early dating, for things that have nothing to do with you. So if you ask for feedback, you might get it, but it might not really be about you. And I think with the show, the things that they said I need to work on are 100% true. Like, communication, definitely. I'm a very poor communicator when I'm emotional. I get very angry. I can say things that are really unnecessary and make the situation worse. So that's something that I know that I need to work on. Not taking things personally when someone is rejecting me or letting me down or whatever. I mean, I feel like it triggers a deep wound that I have about people not showing up for me and people not being there for me, to the point where I can't actually hear what they're saying. So I think that was all valid. But sometimes you get feedback that's not valid. So it's kind of like, how good are you at taking what makes sense and leaving what doesn't?
Yeah. Yeah. And then honoring, we all, blind spots and shadows of things that we don't see. And sometimes we're something that someone may say to us, we might not really understand it till years later. But I do believe that there's a lot of, projections being placed onto us. And, this is not exactly the same thing, but I will remember reading Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. And she talks about how there was a woman who read Eat, Play, Love and came up to her at a book signing and saying, thank you so much for writing that book, because how you shared about your divorce and the abuse in the marriage that you have helped me get out of my relationship. And well, the book, she was not abused. It had nothing to do with that. So we as humans take what we need and hear that supports us in our own growth or sometimes it can keep us safe. Like we're all in their own experience of what they're taking, and keeps them safe and helps them figure out what their next move is. I will ask though, so you are out there and you're having lots of relational experiences, and in each of them, you're practicing communication. And I imagine your communication is getting a little better within each relationship. I would be curious, as the guys that you start to date, if they become better sparring partners so that you then get to continue to, work on your communication. Because I imagine in communication, you're probably a much better communicator than you were in 2021 when you did the show.
Oh, I think that's true. I mean, especially after this last relationship that I was in, I honestly impressed myself with how well I communicated. Like, I was very kind, very upfront. The thing that I did wrong was staying in it too long once he started showing me basically like, I'm not available for the relationship that you want. But I think in order for me to really grow, like, I would have to start picking people who are truly available for the type of connection that I'm looking for. And so far, I have not been able to do that. I seem to be very attracted to deeply unavailable, aloof men. And you can really see that in Brett. Like, he's so cold, and like, it really comes across, I think, like in his demeanor. And that is unfortunately something I'm very drawn to, because there's a part of me that really loves a challenge. Like, oh, this guy doesn't love me. Well, he doesn't love me yet, but he will, and it's like, that's not how it works. And I know that logically, but there's this like lizard brain part of me that is convincing me just keep trying. And it's like, no, that part, like the part of me that tells me to keep trying is exactly when I should be letting go. And I'm not able to put that into practice yet. Although I do think next time, if there is, and I hope there isn't, I will be able to.
I'll give you my sense of what TV show, what reality dating show I think you would be great in, Lauren. I have one for you too, Christina. But have you seen Love is Blind?
Yes, I've seen it. I watch it regularly.
Right. I mean, don't you think that you would do really well in that context?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think maybe, but there's a lot that you don't know when you're just like in a pod with someone, like, and that's kind of why these relationships often fall apart. It's because once they get back out into their real lives, they haven't taken into consideration how this person does or does not fit into whatever life they've already constructed. And so I think when you just like completely disembody the whole process, that's the danger. It's like sure, it might be a meeting of the minds, but like there is also a very embodied part of relationships that you need to experience before it can be true love. Like, in my opinion, you can't say you love someone until you've met them. And these people are sitting in these pods being like, I'm in love with you. It's like, you're not though. Like, I don't believe that.
You're saying you cannot be in love with someone until you physically meet them.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you agree with that, Christina?
Well, yes and no. I think that for is like, what are we viewing as love? So there's like a love, like a universal love. And then there's, say, a soulmate love. And when I say soulmate love, I don't mean one person. It's more like a soulmate energy. If you've been listening to this podcast, you hear me talk about how I view love many times, but I'll share it again, which is that it's this process of removing layers of the ego coupled with ever increasing acts of sharing. Generally, this is an unpopular way to view love. But when somebody says, I love you, they're usually saying, I love myself with you. That is the experience of love. I love who I am when I am with you. And And when you love yourself, you're acting as the highest, greatest version of who you are. You're being authentic and real, and you're sharing, because that's what ever increasing acts of sharing. You're sharing with another human being. So I do believe they can be in a practice of love, but it's hitting the surface, because when you love requires, the soulmate love that now I'm speaking about requires continuing to deepen. And the true love that a lot of us are craving this lifetime is a type of love that's earned. It's like doing that again and again and again and again. So in that moment, I don't want to take away that they are they're being inspired by love. I think that maybe they're being inspired by love, and they're being inspired of who they are being in the time. And I imagine the rush of the excitement of being on TV and doing something totally different. Like you're feeling that high and that essence. Does it translate into real life when they go back into their everyday existence? Are they really ready for something of that sort, for that investment? Because it takes a continued investment. That's what I'm not so sure about.
Yeah.
But I think you answered it in that you can quote unquote fall in love, where you just have all those feelings that you're talking about, right? But then it doesn't mean it's going to work out. The reason that kind of took me back, or kind of made me think a little bit when you said no, Lauren, was that it means that like any long distance kind of correspondence type relationship can't ever really work then, right? Because like there's so many people that end up, I don't know, meeting online, whether it's through social or an app, and they've never met each other. And let's say they're even in other countries. And it does seem like it's pretty common, especially like in like older generations. They seem to do that quite a bit. And I'm just curious if, can it really be real?
I think long distance relationships can definitely work. I mean, I've been in them before. And but I think they can only really work if, so, okay, let me back up. I think long distance relationships are a trap for some people. I think people who are emotionally unavailable are more interested in long distance relationships than your average person. I have wondered if maybe that's why I've gravitated towards them in the past. I think they do leave, they do leave more space for you to have your own independent life, and you don't have to be as intimate. They don't have to see your flaws on the day to day. Like it is kind of like, I think it can be a trap for emotionally unavailable people. That said, if two people are in a long distance relationship and they're making a plan to like be together in person, like someone's going to move, someone's going to do something, then fine. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, if two people are really on the same page, great. I think the reason why they often fail is because it's usually one or both partners in the relationship are not actually emotionally available for a long-term relationship, and they just wish they were. And so they're like basically breadcrumbing themselves. Like, oh, I can do this little bit of affection and love as long as I don't have to like see it in front of me all the time. But I think they can work if two people are really working towards the same goal, whatever that is. And, if two people are happy, just, having a Jane Austen style correspondence over text, like, fine, great, good for them. I mean, I just think most people want to be united with their person at some point.
Yeah. And to us, like, what do we mean when we say the relationship working or that it worked? Because I've had many jobs this lifetime, and every job came to a completion. I typically, in my relational history, I've quit them and moved on to something else. And I believe that each of our souls are going to have a unique intimacy journey this lifetime. And the purpose of our life is to grow and heal. And when I say heal, there's a word in Kabbalah that we use, tikkun. And they believe that each soul comes to this world with its own unique cocoon, which is what you're here to repair, to evolve. And that, in this theory, try it on, is that we're coming back lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes to continue to evolve and to become more and more and more like the creator and back to a sense of oneness with each other and humans. And so if each of our souls are meant to heal and repair, we do that best in relationships. And some of us may have come together with one person and stay with that one person and have multiple relationships with even that one person inside of a 20, 30, 40, 50 year container. And others of us may go through lots of relationships this lifetime, but I don't think that means that they didn't work. When we talk about long distance, I've come to a space in my life where I am not, I'm done with long distance. I did that. I did that in my 30s, maybe some in my 20s. I have it very much which I'm off dating apps right now. The one I was using was Raya, and that's where I met this last person. By the way, I could tell you guys a funny story about, speaking of somebody who doesn't have much relational experience. Maybe I'll come back to that. But in my profile, I do say I'm not interested in dating anyone outside of Austin, Texas. And that's really important to me. My father is a funny example of this. He is, nearly 70, and he was, prior to getting into the relationship he currently is in, he was dating two women. One lived 20 minutes away and one lived 10 minutes away. And he really wanted the one who lived 10 minutes away to work. And it was strictly because she lived in closer proximity. But rewind back to I just have to share, this is a funny story. So I was, months and months ago on a dating app. I met up with this guy. He was a former professional athlete, 42, and didn't have sex until 39. Never. No penetrative sex until 39.
What was going on?
He, his parents were hippies. But he grew up and he believed he was wanting to get married and find his wife. And that's who he was. He was saving himself for marriage. And before he turned 40, he actually had sex with a friend because to scratch the itch not to be the 40-year-old virgin. But when him and I had hung out for the first time, he was very much wanted to talk about sex. We did an exchange where he gave me body work and I gave him relationship coaching in our first, meeting. Cause I was like, I'm not really fully into dating right now, but I am open to meeting new people and exploring what's possible. And so we did that exchange. He talked about sex a lot of the time, and he did end up being one who, in the end got really upset at me for becoming really offended about really silly, stupid things. So we only hung out once in person. And then, I just feel when somebody doesn't have relationship experience, especially in their late 30s, 40s, there is that is, I don't want to say we want them to get experience and want them to get more practice, but that's more, if you want to talk about finances or appearance, I think the more interesting things is your relationship history is even more important than any of that stuff. Have you studied relationships? Have you studied love? Have you been to done any, I don't care if you're going to a therapist, maybe coaching, but have you done a transformational program before? That type of stuff is more interesting to me than
such a thing existed.
I agree with you. I really think it's like you said, there's something going on with someone who just has avoided relationships and sexuality for 3 or 4 decades of their life. I mean, and it's not necessarily something that you as their partner can help them address. That really needs to be done with a professional. So I'm with you.
I just wanted to circle back one last comment on the TV show the reality show that I think you'd be great in, Christina. I don't know if you remember, this is an early days dating show, Shipmates, but it's basically the premise is a bunch of single people on a boat, and they're just out there dating. And you would be like creating activities and events for people and bringing them together. You would be excellent on Shipmates if there was a reality dating show that you should be on instead of X-rated.
So I don't have to compete against other people for dates?
Well, it's usually like one person choosing amongst, multiple. So you would be the chooser, of course.
Okay, thank you. I hate that the idea of having to compete against other is just, right now, what is trending is play parties. Do you know what a play party is, Lauren?
Is that sex thing? Sex party?
Yeah, I guess some people could call them sex parties. Yeah, we mix a little education there, a little conscious, authentic relating aspects to them. Why did I bring up sex parties? Oh, because when you first go, the first one I went to, I went as a single woman, and there was men there, but they had to have a female with them, and there was like three of us single women that didn't have partners. And I was like, this is really weird. When I was a child, I was taught, do not flirt with somebody else's boyfriend. Like, don't do that. So now throwing me into it, the last thing that I want to do is go and compete against other women for a man. That sounds awful. Opt me out. Not interested.
So you'd have to be the Bachelorette where they're all competing for you.
Yeah. I do have also one question about, just reality dating in general, because it's getting bigger and bigger, especially now with the Hollywood strike and people. I feel like TV networks are just mostly leaning into reality shows anyway. What advice would both of you give someone who was about to go on a reality show or a dating show that you've learned from your experience?
I only had 2 rules for myself before I went on that show, and it was don't cry and don't get angry. So I would say that would be my advice. Just because, the show is going to try to manipulate you however they can to get a big, big emotional response. And, at the end of the day, you have to look out for number one. So be your highest self on that show.
I would agree with what you're saying. Not necessarily the anger or the sadness, but more the authenticity of be truly who you are. And people often get nervous around, they're going to make me, look bad. And really, they only can use the content that you give them. That's what somebody told me before I go. They can only use what you give them. So if you give them, as you said, your best self, that's the only thing that they can use. So just be true. I mean, I think the essence of who we are as individuals come out in those experiences. And some people might love it and some people might not like it. When I go back and watch the show, you guys both pointed out, or maybe it was Angel, there was a theme in my show around, if you're not my baby's daddy. And it's funny now, being a couple years have passed, 42, currently single, no baby daddy. And I have constantly had epiphanies around that. Shortly after the show, I actually had spoken to a couple hypnotists about being hypnotized to not want a baby anymore. And Friday night, I was on a massage table. Shout out to Jillian. If anyone's in the Austin area, I can give you a great referral to a massage, and you can use the WeDeepen promo code when you book with her, and you'll get 20% off. So shout out to Jillian. And I was on her massage table, and I just had this epiphany around my path towards motherhood, if that is to happen for me this lifetime. First off, we all can have different intentions, desires, and we can be happy even if we don't see them come true. So for instance, I think Angel, what do you have a goal of making $10 million this year. So you have about 3 more months before. And I don't believe that if you don't hit that goal by the end of the year, that this year has been a miserable year and you don't have a happy life because of that. For me, I know that if I can have this desire to be mother and I can still be happy throughout this lifetime, if I don't have that experience. But anyway, I'm laying on the massage table on Friday, and I've been doing a lot of studies into human design lately, the human design system, which is the science of differentiation. And my design in human design is a projector. And laying on that bed, I was like, you know what? In order for me to feel like being a mother is the right path for me, it will come from invitation. It will come from the right man and us being in the right relationship for him to see me and to say, hey, I would love for you to be the mother of my child. And that might sound really passive, but it's helped me to completely let go of the whole thing, which a little in the show, when we recorded the show, I definitely was holding on to that, because there is, in those dating stages, and also sometimes too, when it comes to like penetrative sex, like if you're not willing to take responsibility for a child and I could get pregnant, then I'm really not interested in fucking you either. If I don't believe, like my soul doesn't believe that you will be able to care for and provide and be an example to a young life, I'm not really interested. And I'm going to continue to be happy this lifetime and have relations. And a little bit. So watching that episode, I'm like, oh gosh, if any new guy that I'm dating sees that, who's going to feel this pressure to be a father and don't engage with her, if not.
Or just the cringe of watching yourself back on TV a couple of years removed from that time and where you were in your life. I mean, I just, I can imagine how you two were putting up with it and being able to just be okay with it. Cause I think that's one of my biggest fears for why I wouldn't do it. Just whatever I think I was, 5 years ago. I'm not that now. So seeing that back would be pretty cringe inducing.
Last thing before we wrap this episode, I want to talk about politeness, because in watching both of our episodes, I can see how we are both being very polite towards these men who are giving us bad ratings. I mean, we didn't get to rate them in this experience. All of these men pretty much said yes to come onto the show. They weren't getting paid loads of money. So they pretty much said yes. Maybe it was because they were fame whores, or otherwise because they loved us in some way, or had some, like a genuine connection to us to say yes to that experience. But when I look back on it, I can think of the 3 men and the things that I didn't share on TV. You were very polite as well. So maybe, can we just go through each guy at a time and say maybe some of the things that we didn't say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Can we start with you? Because you have 4, I have 3. So Isaiah,
God, where do I even start? He just did not have his life together at all. And part of this was me not doing my due diligence. Like I didn't know how old he was until after we had already slept together. Kind of a big oversight on my part. I knew he was younger, but I didn't think he was like early 20s. Yeah, he just, low effort, I would say, just a very low effort person. And I feel like he's very afraid of failure, because often people who don't put in effort, that's their big fear. He didn't put an effort into our date. He didn't put an effort in his own life. Like he just, I don't know. Yeah. Just kind of a low effort guy.
Let's continue. I'm going to continue going through each of them with you, and then we'll go towards me. So Ian,
honestly, I don't know what happened with Ian, and I don't know what his deal is. I do think he's got some sort of untreated mental health thing going on. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's something else. He seemed too insecure or anxious to really like meet me where I was. Like, I actually liked him despite, I mean, looking back on it now, I'm like, why? Like, why did I like him so much? But I really did. And he was so cruel. And like, I felt like he got off very easy on the show when they were like, oh, he was saying this to you, but it's like, but we had plans and he ghosted me. And if I hadn't said that to him, I would have just been left hanging and it just would have been terrible communication. And so that's why I reached out to him to get an answer, which I deserved. And he should have offered to me. And if he didn't want to have that conversation via text, he could have said, let's have this conversation in person or via the phone or anything else. So I felt like he got off very easy by saying, Lauren's just a big bad mean girl. You know, like, I mean, he was playing this like pitiful victim role, which I feel like he does all the time. And that made me a little upset because it's like I was treating him very kindly and very compassionately. And I really would have been his friend had he said, you know, listen, I'm really struggling and like, this isn't something I can do right now. But the fact that I had to reach out to him after weeks of silence was really hurtful. And I think they didn't really take that into account. And then when he wrote those jokes about me, I was like, oh, hell no. Like, you just abused all my goodwill. Like all the kindness that I shared towards you, he completely tore me a new asshole in front of people that knew me. And like, they were loving it. They were like, oh, this is hilarious. You know, like everyone was just eating the popcorn. Like, oh, this is so funny. And I'm like, why am I out here trying to have a genuine relationship with people when they're just using me for like material or whatever? I mean, it was really just hurtful is honestly the word.
And that was after the show.
That was after the show. Yeah. So I have him blocked on all forms of social media, although he does like look at my TikTok profile every so often. It's like, go away.
Randall. You said Randall you're friends with Randall.
Randall's a dear friend. I love Randall. He's a very good guy. He's got the soul of a golden retriever and rainbow all in one.
Brett.
I don't know. Brett is like a lizard person. I don't understand him. He has no capacity for like letting go of control or really having a passionate love connection with someone, in my opinion. I think he was very cruel, manipulative, and honestly emotionally and mentally abusive in our relationship. That part I didn't even get to talk about because I was trying to be like, okay, we haven't seen each other for a couple of years. I want to be magnanimous about the whole thing. I want to be the bigger person. For him to go on there and be like, we were never even engaged. Like basically he tried to say I was really not that important to him, which if he felt that way, it's like, I would have loved to know that in our relationship. Like, if you really didn't feel like I was important to you, why were we in a relationship? Like, that would have been great to know. Really, he was telling on himself and saying like, you know, oh, I never proposed. I never got down on one knee. But like, why would we have, like, I wouldn't have been able to apply for a visa to go live in Australia if he hadn't signed the paperwork and said, we're planning on getting married. Like, this was a thing. So for him to go on TV and be like, she's crazy, it's like, you're just telling on yourself. Like, there's receipts. Like, I can show people all the conversations that we had, the plans that we had made. And it's really gross for you to go back and like renounce that later just because it didn't work.
Did his new girlfriend reach out to you on social media?
She did. That's correct.
Do you think they were in a relationship when he did the show?
I have no idea. She wouldn't give me any details about their relationship. And honestly, I didn't pry. But I saw her looking at my social media. I looked at her profile on Instagram and I saw her kissing him like right on her grid. So I was like, I like kind of went off on her and said, you know, what are you doing checking up on me? Like, tell Brett to go fuck himself, basically. And she said, no, you've got the wrong idea. Like, I saw you on the show and I really thought you were cool. And like, I really like seeing how you're doing. You seem like you're doing so much better now that you're not with Brett. And I was like, I am. And then I warned her about him because she's also not from Australia. She's going to need a visa of some kind to stay in the country. So I said, please be careful. Do not attach your visa status to this man if possible. Like go another route, get a job, like do something else. I just said, you seem lovely. Just be careful. That was really my agenda with talking to her, but I don't know what her agenda was with talking to me. I don't really know.
Fascinating. All right. If I go one by one with each of my guys and how I was so polite and what I didn't say. Number one, Umberto and I had went out on a couple of dates. It was all, true. The story of him professing his love to me in front of a group at an event. It was so sincere and so sweet. And when I say he wasn't ready, I'm just going to be fully honest. He was drinking like a lot at that time period. And my father is a lifelong high functioning alcoholic. And I just can't I can't do the too much alcohol. Second, Zach, I hired Zach, and New Year's moving into 2022, he professed his love to me. And it was so endearing. I was so shocked. But it was also, this man was showing up every day in an office. Like, I had just lived in second bedrooms and on couches for the year and a half prior to WeDeepen's now taking off when I got to hire a team. And he moved out of his home and was living in his car to work for this dream that I had, and sacrificing with me like every day. And once we got the office, he showed up at the office every single day. And I was paying this man like $800 a month. Like, that's how much we were paying at the time. It was like $800 a month. And he was full-time in. So there was also something so endearing about that. But when he began working for my company, he was in a relationship with somebody else. And so as you're building a company and when your new employee contractor, he wasn't an employee, so he's a contractor, starts working for me, I want to support your relational life. We're a relationship company. I want to support that. And I know that they were exploring polyamory, which was not of interest to me because I just see from an energy, I very much value my energetics, and it's just too complicated for my own system. My system can't take that much traction on it. So they had broken up. They had a, in and out, but yeah, New Year's, he professes his love. He's living out of his car. He kind of, he smoked cannabis and cigarettes, and there was I had the hygiene question, reverse, and I got to answer the hygiene on a scale of 0 to 10 for him. It would be like a 2. And Zach, I love you. I really do love you. And then he would want to hold my hand in business meetings. So he, rated me really low on affection, but I'm raising money for a company right now. I can't hold your hand in business meetings. And then he went and after finally, his courting every day in the office, I finally was like, okay, yes, I love you. Let's do this. And he went and he slept with his ex. And so for me, I was just done. And he came back. He was one of the first men who came back and was super honest about it. I felt so much healing in that moment when he was like, listen, I want to be with you, but you should know I slept with X, Y, and Z. And there was this almost like giggle inside of my body because at least someone's fucking telling me the truth. I've had many men lie in the past. But at that point, the attraction was over and I was done with it. And then Michael, after dating, he
was the worst at all.
Michael, I made this, I came up with this idea after dating Michael that like all bald men must be hard-headed, because he was so fucking hard-headed. Like at times he would be stuck on an idea that like it was so over, similar to the 90 days thing. The 90 days, I had proposed that, and he was so disturbed by it that I threw the idea away. Like we never, as I said on the show, we never went a day without talking. So, but he stuck onto it. It became like this thing. And I'm like, I put it out there. We talked about it and I moved on. He would like, it even came, we were dating. It was, early pandemic. We made the cross country road trip in 2020. And it was around, the George Floyd murder. And we'd have these conversations around like politics or whatever may being. And WeDeepen, we hosted, gatherings to talk about this stuff in community and share research. And months later, after situations, he would be so stuck in the thoughts. And I was like, what are we? And yeah, you thought that he had his ego. He was definitely projecting his ego inside of that experience. And I think that was a lot of it. Now, I did have an astrologist once look at our charts, and she was like, you guys are from two separate planets. Me, Aries, him, Virgo sun, both suns. And she's like, you're just from two separate planets. I did, prior to going on the show, I made a binder about myself that I thought I was going to prance out on the show with my binder. That was like, this is about Christina. Each chapter, each different divider had like my human design chart, my gene keys, my love languages, like any thoughts written about love. So if they were critiquing me, I could pull out my binder and be like, well, actually, this is normal for who I am and based upon how the sun, moon, and stars aligned when I was born, or how my brain processed this information. This made sense. You're saying this way because this is who I am. But it was a fascinating experience. I'm glad I did it. I am definitely very much intrigued by each of our relational journeys and the stories that we gather along the way. And I love what you're doing, is that, having the boldness and the courage to stand up on stages and share about your experiences and creates like comedic reliefs. They say tragedy plus time equals comedy, and some of that there.
No, I really think, Michael, he took you asking for 90 days worth of like space for reflection as a rejection. And I think that's why he's so stuck on that. And I think that's why he turned around and had sex with his ex. And for you, you're just like, I was just like thinking, like I was just giving an idea. Like we didn't have to settle on that. You were clearly just exploring ideas with him. And he took that as like, she doesn't want me, and I really think that's why he was so stuck on it, because he took that just like you throwing something out there to talk about together as like a rejection of him personally.
And you know what? It's interesting. I am in a 90-day no contact with somebody else right now. And I'm finally getting to fulfill my fantasy about doing it, because my human design is, my profile is a 6-2. If you're familiar with human design, you might know what a 6-2 is, but it's a role model hermit. And there's the stages that 6 line. It means that your life is broken up into 3 stages: trial and error before Saturn return. Then the next 20 years from 30 to 50, you're kind of on the roof is how they define it. You're observing and you're seeing what's best for you and feeling things out and discovering the world. And then in the last, after 50 is when you become a master in your existence. So those 90 days, those experiences, when I'm asking for them, it's really for me to be in a reflection state, to contemplate, is this healthy for me? Is this not healthy? Does it feel good to be with you? Does it feel better being alone? Like our society is so tight into wanting to know in every moment of what a connection is. And I think adding some spaciousness, maybe I'm a demisexual too, because adding this spaciousness feels good for my nervous system. And so we're not even just piling experiences on top of experiences, but we have time to integrate and process. And yeah.
And I really think that a lot of these guys just couldn't handle that because you're very firm in what you want and firm in your boundaries. And I think they took your needs and wants very personally. Like, oh, she needs space right now. That must mean she doesn't want me. So I better go have sex with my ex. Like, why don't I?
Totally. Yeah. Eat that comfort food. Go get it. Lauren, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we did this. And Angel, thank you for always listening to the podcast and encouraging the podcast and now sharing your voice on the first one.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for letting me talk to two reality television stars. It's really
Thank you.
Lauren, what's next for you?
No, I don't know. I'm currently dating again, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately just because I was really in love with my previous partner. And I definitely didn't want that to end the way it did. But so I'm out there, single again. I'm continuing to work on my comedy. And yeah, I'm just hoping the next one works out a little bit differently for me.
How long ago did this last relationship end?
Only a couple of weeks ago.
So you're in the reflection process of what happened.
Definitely.
Well, I'm happy to give you, we can do some one-on-one time. I'm happy to give you a session and talk any of that through with you if you'd like.
That'd be amazing. Thank you, Christina.
Okay, I'll send that link. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Deepen with Christina. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate it, share it with a friend. It helps me continue to record it. And I love doing this. But what I love most is being with you in real life at events, festivals, conferences. If you're listening to this episode pre or in the fall of 2023, so pre-2024, go to the website. You'll see the Wonderland Conference is coming up. I'll be there doing the Playful Portal, the Dating Dojo, and also Mind-Blowing Intimacy Panel. Unleash Transformational Festival is coming up. Check it out. See all the things on the calendar. And I look forward to sharing more about WeDeepen's Love Club with you soon. Okay. Bye for now.